Today I'm going to go over our new 5/8 inch quilt binder. What this does, it creates easily a double folded binding for your quilts. So I'm going to start from telling you what's in the box and then go through all the steps. Of course, it comes with the binder itself and the platform that screws into your plate on your machine that holds the binder in place, and then two different feet that have guides attached. One is for the Epic 2 because the Designer Epic 2 has the IDF and it needs to have the cutout in the back. Then the other foot is for the other HUSQVARNA Viking machines that can utilize this quilt binder. And you can tell which machines can utilize it by looking at the top of the box, or by going to your accessory guide that's on the HUSQVARNA Viking webpage. So to start, I have screwed in this platform to the plate, and I'm going to, I have already tightened this down. Now I'm going to put the binder in place. It fits like so. And then I have a screw and a washer to hold the binder itself to the platform. Now, I've previously created a 3-inch long strip of binding fabric and pressed it with the wrong sides together and cut a point on the end to help it go through the binder easily. Now, I haven't tightened this down yet because by not tightening it to begin with, I have some ability to adjust it. So I will make that significantly tighter once I get things in place. The first thing you're going to do is weave your binding fabric through this curly Q on the end. It helps to hold the binding and keep it from turning in on itself. So you just weave it through the curly part, and then start to feed it through. And it certainly helps to have something a little bit sharp to grab it to help it push through. And these right angle pieces of metal on here are what create the fold to make the binding shape that kind of looks like a taco, and your quilt sandwich goes in there, so it's like the meat in the taco. And these right angle pieces of metal create that shape. So I'm going to pull it at a right angle here, pull it through here. And now it's made that magical fold. So now what I want to see is I want to see that my fabric is at a right angle to the quilt binder and it's butted up against the guide on the side of the foot. And when I see that, then I'm going to tighten this because I've got this in a good position. If I needed to, I could have pushed this left or right. Then I'm just going to put my foot down to hold it in place momentarily. Then take my quilt sandwich and stick it in between the layers of the binding. And I'll start in the middle of the row so that it'll be easy to connect the two ends when I go all the way around. So I just kind of wiggle it in there. And I'm going to take a look to make sure when I put the foot down that my binding is at a right angle, and I'll move my needle over towards the edge of the binding, the inner edge. Put my needle down and then start sewing. Now as I'm sewing, I'm making sure that the quilt sandwich is inside of the binding. I also watch that my tail of my binding isn't getting turned around. And I'll sew all the way to the edge of the quilt binding. Then I'm going to fix it and cut my thread. Then I'm going to take it out, and you'll see looks really nice. And now it's time to do the miter. Now you can see it looks very nice on the front and the back. Now for the miter. In the instructions, it recommends that you use a pin in the front and the back, and then you have to pull them out at the last minute before you sew so that your needle doesn't hit the pin, and I find that a little bit awkward. What I prefer to do is use Elmer's school glue. Elmer's school glue is just starch and it will wash right out. So what I'll do is I'll put some wherever there's going to be a fold of fabric, so on the binding there, and then on the first part of the once we turn the corner, then do the same on the back side. And the Elmer's school glue creates enough tackiness that it holds the miter together until I get it sewn down. So then what I'll do is I put my thumb in the inside of the binding and then push with my finger to form that triangular shape that we have when you have a good miter. And then I kind of mash it down to get the glue to adhere. And then I'm going to make that triangular shape on the back side as well and mash that down. Now, if you see some glue hanging out, which you will on black fabric much more readily, don't worry, it's going to wash out. So there, that's the miter is formed. Then the next part is you have to get the binding shape back. So you pull a binder and then just kind of work it back and forth, and then it will form that nice binding shape again. Then you need to position it so the needle goes into the binding where you want the seam. And then I would give this a good tug. Make sure that your quilt sandwich is inside. So here's our miter, front and back, with the threads ends clipped, and you'll see a little bit of glue, but that's all going to wash off. Now I have taken it out of the quilt binder and made a seam to join the two ends of the binding. And what I would recommend is that you iron it down, because you do need to turn it under on the front, and you want to make sure that it is uniform on the back. You can even, in this gap, put a little bit of the glue if you want to hold that in place, because you don't really see it as you're stitching. And then you're going to just stitch along here till you get to where your seam ended previously, and you're done.